Welcome to Shallow. Join us as we explore the topics that are always on our minds, from beauty and wellness trends to balancing our careers and ambitions. These conversations fill our WhatsApp inboxes and social media feeds. We're diving into pop culture and asking the question, is it really that deep?
On today's episode, we're going to talk to Bethan Walters. She's a menstrual health advocate and she lobbies at the United Nations, along with regionally trying to encourage better access, education, and dignity in the menstrual health space.
Bethan Walters, welcome to Shallow. How are you today? How's your day been? Obviously, we're working with a bit of a time difference here. You're about to go to bed. We've just woken up, if you couldn't tell. How are you doing?
She's good. She is enjoying the UK winter, unlike you guys, soaking up that vitamin D and therefore has the sniffles. But yeah, I'm very excited to be on Shallow.
Well, thank you for making the time and working with the time difference. We've already had multiple tech issues and fuck ups this morning, so we're gonna make it work. But briefly, before we get into it, what sparked your interest in women's health?
I can never really pinpoint. I think that I've always been interested since doing the yoga training and personal training, and very much being aware that it's kind of based off of the assumption that everyone operates in the same way in terms of kind of how bodies function, and not really even spending any time or space on kind of how the female body operates and the hormones that impact that, and the male body, particularly around kind of muscle building, etc. So that's kind of sparked a lot of interest in doing that about 10 years ago. And then I think from there, retrospectively, having my own kind of health things that popped up, and then being able to kind of speak to doctors about, oh, well, I didn't have a period for like 3 years when I was in like from about 14 to 17, and only a decade after that, maybe even a little bit longer, them kind of like recommending I have like a bone density test and a load of other tests to make sure that I'm not going to, have all of these complications for basically not producing enough estrogen for like 3 years of my life, particularly around puberty. So I think, it was kind of more retrospectively then looking back at kind of experiences that I had and other people had, from then also kind of the work I've done in the yoga and PT in space, and kind of thinking actually there's an entire space that feels a little bit not untapped. It's definitely been researched, but it's something that we're not really ever taught about unless you do actively your own research, and then it becomes this pit hole of where you could fall into misinformation or generalizing really complex stuff, and kind of creating a bit of a spiral. But often just basically seeing it as women's health is way too complex. So let's just assume that when we talk about anything, we're assuming everyone experiences the same thing.
I feel like that feeds into the pill quite nicely, because often we've kind of been given to us as this like catch-all medication. And obviously you touched on it already. There's a lot of chat around contraception. There's a lot of misinformation online. I think the pill for so many of us is something that we were given in our teens without a second thought. And, like the shallow take of that is that it's a straightforward method of contraception, but we wanted to dive a bit further into it and ask, if it's really that deep. So when we're going into these doctors' offices at like 12, 13 with acne or painful periods, and we're just kind of being like chucked this pill, like, are we just making a fuss out of nothing?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that this kind of space, and particularly around hormonal contraception, really sparked my kind of interest when I kind of started digging a bit deeper into it. I did a kind of part-time master's in the contemporary menstrual studies, and one of the kind of tasks we had with that kind of part master's course was to conduct our own research. And I was really fascinated by looking at kind of a more mixed method study for reasons that people gave for taking the pill, the main reason they would put on it, the first reason, and then if they did discontinue the birth control pill, why that was. And so I really made sure it was just generically the pill, not the combined pill, not the progesterone only pill, but just the pill as we know it, which again, you know, there's millions of pills in the world, but the minute someone says the pill, we know exactly like what pill they're talking, despite there being within that hormonal contraception space of taking a pill being a variety of different pills that have, you know, a different chemical makeup. So whether it's both synthetic estrogen and progestin rather, or if it's just progestin only, and then within that there's still about, you know, 10 or different types of that chemical it could be. But yeah, doing that like research, there was 250 people in the research from 6 different continents, and I found that basically I asked an array of questions in this survey, and some of the youngest people who were put on the pill, 7 of which who kind of filled out the survey, were 11 years old. And then the most common ages were between 14 and 17. And yeah, it was just really interesting to kind of find out a bit more. Again, light touch, it was, you would want to do focus groups further from this, and there's so many kind of also downsides to research, so it's never perfect, but it does give you a little window into kind of what the reality is for some, or for so many. And so again, like, one of the questions I asked was the primary reason you went on birth control, the birth control pill, for contraception? And 56% of the people answered no, and then 44% answered yes. So over half were initially put on the pill, not for contraceptive reasons. And I think that's just literally what you spoke about, is that so many people are given it to quote unquote regulate your cycle, which that might be the language that doctors have used, but that's not technically what it's doing, because you're not having a cycle during that. It's not a normal cycle. Or for menstrual pain, like you said, for acne, so / managing it, hormonal imbalances, as well as like heavy bleeds and stuff like that. So yeah, it was really interesting to see kind of just an insight into how did people start their journey, and then how long have they been on it. And yeah, that was just quite an interesting kind of just take to see kind of where people are at.
Yeah, I think obviously going on the pill for non-contraceptive reasons is something quite a lot of people can relate to. I remember taking part in this research for you, and I think that, you know, when I got to the question of did you get put on the contraceptive pill initially for contraceptive reasons, it was instantly no, because I went on it for bad skin. That was like number one cure all as soon as I went in. I think they maybe gave me a couple of topical treatments for a few months before, and then, you know, maybe that was kind of making my skin dry or not really working, and yeah, they put me on that, and that's Dianet, and I was actually on that from maybe the age of like 16, 17 until I was about 24, which you know, in hindsight now, you know, I remember eventually being taken off it, and it was a case of, oh wait, you've been on this for however many years, like 10 years almost. Yeah, you should never have been on that for that long. You should have been on that for 2 years maximum. And I was just kind of like, what? Like, I've been coming in for like I've been coming in for like take my blood pressure, and, you know, they take your weight on that, and, you know, because it's quite a high estrogen pill, if I'm correct. So it can be quite, you know, high risk for strokes and blood clots. So yeah, when I eventually kind of came off it is when I was kind of given other pill alternatives, and then I started having complications. So with Dianet, I kind of, you know, it cured my acne, and for the most part, I didn't really have painful periods. You know, I didn't experience many like side effects, but it was soon as I kind of came off that and started trying out like the combined pill, or, you know, another one called Yasmin, and then suddenly, you know, I had all these problems. My skin was flaring back up again. I was feeling like mood swings here, there, and everywhere. And yeah, just problem after problem, really.
Yeah, I think that's such a I guess just like a textbook answer for so many people when it comes to just their experience of again being on again, and it is typically the pill. I mean, a lot of the time people don't really use the other hormonal contraceptions as widely. It will be just like variations of the pill, and I think that again they will all work in different ways. I mean, yeah, like Dianette is kind of used more as a way of particularly for acne, like in terms of it is often prescribed for people who have acne or other kind of androgen related conditions. And so androgen is that kind of group of sex hormones that play quite a big role in development and maintenance of male characteristics typically, although they're present in both women and men. But basically it's kind of primary, the androgen primarily is like testosterone and the kind of others such as, you know, yeah, there's just various kind of other elements that come to it. But again, that's because of how that pill will work, will basically really try to manage, I guess, the presence of it. It's almost like this anti-androgen kind of properties that it has. But again, you don't ever have that explanation. And a big thing that I found in the research, and a lot of it was anecdotal as well, just by speaking via people or allowing them to kind of leave their own comments in this research, was that I'm absolutely not against the pill for any reason. It's created so many opportunities for people. It's liberated so many. Unfortunately, birth control is going to be really, really needed in the US, for instance, etc. There are so many positives that it's brought. But a big issue I have with it is is prescribing it to teenagers when they couldn't tell you what it is. I think there was a study whereby, I think it was 64 or something percent of UK students, like as in schoolgirls, when they were given the pill, they couldn't name the brand they were on. And to be honest, I thought it'd be higher than that. But my biggest irk, I suppose, with it is that, yes, you can give them the pill to treat or to kind of cover up some of the symptoms that are coming with very likely any menstrual disorder, because there are so many that are quite common. I think 15% of women have PCOS, 10% of women have endometriosis, probably more than that. There's fibroids impact like 80% of people technically, but some will have it way worse. So there's so many menstrual disorders that are around, but it's give them the pill to alleviate those pains, because unfortunately we still don't have a cure for them. But do that while trying to get to the root cause of why is it this person has really bad skin? Why is this person bleeding excessively and passing out from pain or losing too much blood? You know, do it along with diagnosis. Don't do it as this will put it off for a couple of years, because they're not going away. Like, the pain might go away, and that's fantastic, and that's why we need it. But it's not treating anything. Like, you'd be lucky if you wake up one day taking the pill after 10 years and stop taking it and then it's gone. Like, that's not what the reality is. So I think that's my biggest irk with it, is just kind of using it as here you go, shut up, and then kind of basically just kicking the can down the road.
So what you think basically is that the contraceptive pill is given as kind of a fix, but they don't really take the time to actually figure out what is actually wrong with you, or kind of the root cause of maybe why you're in so much pain. And it might fix the symptoms, but years later that person might want to come off the contraceptive pill and not have to take birth control for that, and then they realize they've got these array of symptoms and issues again that have arisen. And then it's kind of a lengthy case of trying to get somebody to diagnose you with, how do you say it again? Endometriosis. Yeah, why is it are you saying it's kind of being viewed as this fix-all because we don't kind of have the health system in place to kind of care enough to kind of diagnose these things?
Yeah, I think exactly that. Women have been left out of any research study. Like an incredible book, Invisible Women, kind of just speaks exactly to this, but women have been left out of any research studies. I'm pretty sure the 80s is when it became legally you needed to, at least in the EU, to include women in studies. So there's even like female version of Viagra that was never tested on women, even on female animals as well. So most research or drugs that are prescribed, particularly if it was, you know, about 40 years ago when they were created, have never ever been tested on women. And the reason for that is the kind of ethical consequences of it. Women could be obviously pregnant, and so you would almost need to do a pregnancy test every single time you involve them in any study, just to kind of protect yourself. But on top of that, it's the fluctuating hormones. Women live almost like the moon, right? Women's hormones will change over the space of, give or take, a few days, but 28 days, say, for argument's sake. Whereas male hormones are very much like the sun, in the sense of it's a 24-hour hormone kind of cycle there, and it's led by testosterone mostly, whereas women have progesterone and estrogen that kind of are involved in it, along with other hormones, but those are kind of the main ones. And so again, if you're including them in research studies, it becomes way more complex, because you're trying to basically test them either at the same time of their cycle every time, where their hormones are exactly the same like space or same kind of levels, or you're just having to accept that, okay, this pill or this product is only efficient when their estrogen and progesterone are really low, like the first day of their cycle. So again, that's kind of why they've been left out. But it therefore means that, I don't know, we've just not really we've just kind of tried to basically fit the female body into very much a male space. And we see that with everything, right? Beyond hormones, everything is kind of like, it's fit for the man, and then women kind of fit into that. But I just think that this is like an example where, God, if men, we normalize severe bleeding and severe pain so much when it comes to menstrual pain and menstrual cycles. It's the only time ever in the world where you'll have someone who's bleeding potentially really heavily for maybe a whole week, and no one's expected to know about it, and you're not talking about it. But to the point as well, and it gets even worse when you look into kind of more marginalized communities where pain is so normalized, or it's not believed when you go to the doctors. And that's why you'll see such a spread of different communities almost having even more people who have kind of endometriosis or fibroids, etc. There'll be kind of lots of reasons in terms of their genetic makeup, but a lot of it will also be they're not believed by doctors, etc. So I just think that the health disparities between men and women, and then even more intersectionally, are so severe that we still don't have a cure for endometriosis. And to actually get it diagnosed, similar to a lot of the other kind of menstrual disorders, it's actually pretty hard, because you need to do effectively keyhole surgery to be able to actually see them. So you can kind of take a guess and be like, okay, we've done an ultrascan, we're assuming it. But even then, when you do the ultrascan, sometimes people will kind of be hinted that they might have like ovarian cancer before it ever gets diagnosed as endometriosis. And even within that, there's different stages. So I just think that to argue that there is not like this disparity would just be, I don't know, talking to a brick wall, because it's just so obvious.
I know I've definitely had it going into the doctor's surgery with really, really painful period pains, and they don't really know what to do with me, I guess. The pill is always offered. It's always, take the pill. Have you thought about the pill? What about the pill? And I just wondered what your personal thoughts on the contraceptive pill are. Obviously, you've touched on it. You've touched on the importance of it. With the benefit of hindsight, knowing now we're 10, 20 years down the track and you're doing this research and there's more coming out around the pill, do you think it ultimately does more harm than good? Or do you think it's great, we just need to be better at researching women's health in general?
I think for me to say it does more harm than good would be quite privileged on, I never need to use it as a way of relieving any pain to my cycle. I don't have, only occasionally I'll have very severe pain, but otherwise I would have like probably a very healthy typical cycle. So I do think that, granted, we actually need a cure, or at least very kind of specific drugs that treat, or at least try to alleviate the symptoms of things like endometriosis, etc. Those are kind of the priorities, rather than here's the pill, it will also do all these other things to you. But one of the kind of pluses to it, which we didn't intend for it to happen, but we've just noticed this is one of the qualities of how the pill works, means that it's probably going to reduce how much you bleed or the pain you have. So I think it's twofold. One is obviously way more research and taking seriously the menstrual disorders that exist. And I do appreciate it's a lot easier said than done. And there are some incredible people kind of in that space trying to kind of break through. But the other bit is, I guess, not talking to women as if they're stupid, as if they couldn't possibly understand their own cycle, and so therefore using language that isn't quite accurate, but basically simplifies how the cycle works, or how a certain contraceptive pill or product works. I think we do not get good enough education at school on actually how the menstrual cycle works. We get the very basic biology of the egg gets released, this is what happens if you don't fertilize the egg, this is what happens if you do. But we don't get at all an insight into how incredible the menstrual cycle is in terms of giving you a window into your overall health, or using it as like this vital sign. Women have got this like extra, I don't know, I see it as like a superpower effectively, where you can genuinely see a pretty good idea of how healthy a woman is based on their hormone levels and how their menstrual cycle is showing up month on month. And we just don't ever get taught how to use that. Like, if you go to the doctors with anything, most of the time, even if you got in a car crash, one of the first questions they will ask you is, when was the last day of your cycle? Because again, they want to understand where you are in the menstrual cycle, because it will make an impact in terms of what hormone levels you have. It's not just a kind of empty question because they're nosy about it, or they're wondering if you're going to have a bleed. If you said, well, my last menstrual cycle was 40 days ago, then it's like, okay, clearly something's going on here. So it's just a lack of education that I think, I would imagine, stems quite a lot into then the medical space, because again, I just don't think it's almost everyone is aware when you do some research into it that it's this massive thing that like gives you so much information about a person, that it's almost easier to just see it as, even when we use the term menstrual cycle, we almost see it as only referring to the bleed. And I think that when people talk about periods, they think about it as that 5-day bleed or whatever it is for you. And it's like, but it's not just that. Like, it's not like we bleed once a month and that's it. There's an entire journey going on with us, and that means we're going to show up differently, and it means that our mood is going to be slightly different, and it means that our appetite is going to be different. It means that maybe we will perform better or worse during different exercises, etc. There's so much to it that I think is such a shame to not educate us on it, because it's just like this incredible piece of body literacy that we're just basically stripping, or kind of preventing people from learning about their own body.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting, especially the if you get in a car crash, they'll ask you about your menstrual cycle, and I just found that like kind of mind-blowing, because only in the past kind of like 2 or 3 years I've really started to kind of understand how my menstrual cycle works. Like, obviously, I know how it works. I know the physicality of how the menstrual cycle works. But I think the only reason I've kind of understood it is from kind of tracking it myself and actually learning about the different phases, and also mapping them with my own emotions and symptoms. And, for me, I've realised that, I have 2 days before I ovulate where I feel absolutely terrible. Like, me and Phoebe were talking about this, like, it's like they're my doom days. Like, I just feel like hopeless. And like, I used to, I kind of go through life like, why do I feel this low? Like, I feel utterly hopeless right now. And it's only since kind of tracking my periods, you know, there's a lot more apps, and there's a lot, you know, there is a bit of an influx I've noticed, especially in like kind of social media, you know, natural cycles being one of them. I know you're a big advocate for natural cycles. And yeah, only through kind of tracking and doing that have I learned about my own cycle, and therefore learned more about, you know, the menstrual cycle in general.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject there quickly. Lucy has been with me obviously all month, so she's seen me through a cycle, and I think, you know, she saw me on my doom days where I just feel like I'm a different person, and I feel like I just feel a bit hopeless. I felt useless. I was apologizing for just existing, and it wasn't until I was like encouraged by you, Bethan, to track my cycle and make myself aware of how I feel at different parts in the months, while it hasn't been like, oh, okay, I'm fine because I know I'm on my period. It's been like, I'm aware of why I feel like this now, and I know that this storm will pass. But I really like the way you framed it as like body literacy, and how this is almost like a key to understanding our bodies and how we perform in different parts of the month. But similar to you, Luce, that thing about the car crash, that blew my mind, because like, how is this the first thing they ask should you come in sick, but yet they're not prioritizing it for other medical reasons?
I think that's why I was so confused, because I was like, you go into the doctor's office and they're like, oh no, it couldn't possibly be that. And then you know, one of the first things they ask you if you get in an accident is about your menstrual cycle. So yeah,
I think it's one of those that I can imagine as a doctor, you have the tick box questions you need to ask, and that's just one of them. And it's like, how many doctors would genuinely or confidently tell you, oh, this is the reason we asked this question? And I think that, you know, if you are going to the doctor's surgery, for instance, with migraines, right? If I'm going to the doctors with migraine issues or really, really low moods, again, unfortunately, well, if we encourage kind of body literacy and people to kind of track their cycle and journal it in one way, it doesn't have to be as a form of contraception, but just every day in their diary, just take note of, this is how I felt today, whatever it is. But basically, again, one of the kind of reasons why, for instance, if I went to the doctors with migraines, what I'd like to think they would ask is, how often are you having them? And now if I'm saying, oh, well, it happens, I'd say once a month, without really clicking that it's related to my cycle, then at least what they can or should be doing is recognizing this is actually probably a hormonal issue, rather than you have migraines kind of very, you know, all over the place. So it might be that I have one once a week or something like that. That's probably indicating it's not a hormonal issue and there's something else that's giving me migraines, whatever that might be. But if it's something that, oh, I get it once a month and that's what I used to have and sometimes do, it'll be the day before or the day of my cycle, first cycle. And again, that's an indication to say, oh, okay, this is a hormonal issue, in the sense if there's maybe a hormonal imbalance, or if I'm on any birth control. If again, it's however the birth control works, depending on which one you're on, it might be well, this sounds like it's a symptom of the birth control you're on. And so I just think, again, that's why if we taught the menstrual cycle or the ovulation cycle, again, which maybe indicates it a little bit more accurately as to what we're tracking, but if we encourage people to use and see the cycle as this genuine health indicator, like we would with, I don't know, with your weight or with kind of your temperature or your pulse or any of these other indicators into our health, if we genuinely taught it as this kind of extra one that only women have, then we would be encouraging people to be a bit more conscious about it. And it also might then stop some people wanting to go on the pill, because they might see it as, oh, okay, there is a purpose to my cycle other than to one day maybe get me pregnant. Like, yes, that's why it exists, but there's so much more to offer from the cycle. And I think there's always like this kind of, whenever I speak about the cycle to people, there's the kind of that feminist in you where you really don't want to almost create another excuse for men to use the cycle against you, to say that, oh, women are fickle because their hormones will change and therefore their mood is changing, so you can't really predict how they're going to show up, or they're going to be a bitch for like an entire week, right? And my counter to that is, while if someone told me their age and the day of their last period, I could probably quite accurately tell you how they're showing up, because I can tell you where their hormones should be if they're kind of in a healthy place, if they're healthy cycle. Now, while male testosterone, their kind of their main sex hormone, is 24 hours, and it's a lot more predictable in the sense of just typically the male testosterone will peak at the most absurd things. So for instance, it will be lower if they're married. If they are in the presence of a gun, or their football team has won or something like that, it spikes massively. If they kind of win an argument, there's just so many things that make testosterone spike. So it's like, if we're playing the card of who's fickle, men have very fickle hormones too, right?
Amen to that.
Yeah. I was gonna yeah, that's hilarious. I think we will have to get you back on to talk more about cycle and that kind of hormone situation, because I need to get deeper into that. I think the way we like to wrap these episodes up is basically starting by the shallow take and then asking ourselves, is it really that deep? So Bethan Walters, as you're our guest today and the all-round expert, the pill, is it really that deep?
Yeah, I think it is. I think we don't understand it enough, and we can't talk about what we're on, and we don't really understand how it works in our body, even all the research. And so I think the consequences of it are massive. I think the benefits are also humongous, and it is appropriate for some people at some point in their life, but it's not being used in the right way. It's not transparent. So I think it's deep.
She's deep.
There's a spectrum, right? There's a spectrum. And just a kind of final thought, as you was kind of talking earlier, it kind of took me back to when I was in primary school, and I remember sitting in it was like a sexual health class, and I think it was maybe like year 3 or 4, and we were learning about periods, and they actually took the boys to a separate room to talk to them about their willies or whatever. I really remember this, and I remember sitting there like, why are they taking the boys out? And then they started, they brought up pads and they brought up tampons, and they just started talking about, basically the symptoms of a period. And, in retrospect, looking back at that, I'm kind of like, yeah, they really should have been in that class. There's absolutely no reason why they should not have been in that class. Like, why were they taken off and talked to about, what goes on with their bits, but not, the other way around. And I think, maybe it starts at a young age like that. And I'm 28 now, and I've only kind of gotten more of an understanding of my own cycle in the past few years, and then looking back at that kind of anecdote, I'm kind of like, well, yeah, that's why.
We're almost like set up to fail, isn't it, to be honest? If you're going to segregate kids at that age and be like, this isn't about you, then from the get-go those boys are learning that's none of my business.
Yes,
100%. I think there's like an episode in Sex Education where they do the exact kind of thing, and it's you want to make sure you're holding spaces so people can ask these maybe more vulnerable questions if they're anxious. But it's so important to teach both sides of it, because I mean, you're basically, like you said, set up to fail. You're reiterating this idea of this is something you deal with in whatever way you deal with it, and you keep that under wraps. Don't let anyone
keep that to yourself.
Anymore.
Period's disgusting. Go in that room.
Girly problem.
Girly problems. And now it's time for...
And what a pile of bollocks!
This is the time in the show where we just chat shit about something insignificant that just really fucks us off, riles us up, makes us mad. So, Bethan Walters, it's your turn. You are our guest, and you need to take the floor. What pisses you off the most?
Not under pressure, I would be able to rattle off like 100. I was torn between 2. One is definitely a massive pet peeve, which is loud eating. I just can't do it. But the other one that I actually feel like I could rant about more is like the runner influence phase, which actually I feel like we're at the end of. I don't know. But that is definitely just... It's not that serious. People are having fun, and there's so many positives to it. I'm glad we're promoting that rather than like, here's the cocaine I did the other day. But yeah, I don't know. I find it really, and like I've heard like people will pay people to do like runs on their Strava, or they will like fake go for a run and then they'll say they've done like 20 miles or something.
No, they won't. No, they won't. This is not a real thing.
So those Stravas you're seeing, because Phoebe gets really mad when she sees somebody posting their Strava. So not only are they posting their Strava on Instagram, they're also lying about it.
What are you lying for?
Someone else is doing like, what you're lying for. What the fuck?
So what is it about those running influencers that really gets under your skin?
I think it's the uniqueness that they're trying to bring to their page that I'm like, but you've created this content knowing that it's currently doing really, really well on social media. And you're kind of, particularly when you start, again, massive fan of running. So my algorithm is, granted, a lot of it's more like elite runners. I'll take that, but it's some slip through. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do this if you're not an elite runner, by all means. But if you are, again, like blonde white woman running through Southwest London, here's the street I
get
run
off my
for.
feed.
Again, do that, but don't film it. Like, why do we need to see it? And then it's like, but you're doing this to get sponsorships and to get like, I don't know, you know, when you're just like, it feels like capitalism, but in a space that I really like, I use as an escapism or like a way of like bettering myself, whatever it is. And it's just like, don't ruin it.
I know those videos as well. They're the ones where they take so long to put all their kit on, and they'll like zoom in on the brand of socks they're pulling up, and like their shoes and their band, and then their like jacket, and then they'll do like an ASMR thing where they put their bottle in their chest pocket, and it's the oh, I got my nails done, like, oh, but I'm going for a run, I'm a girly, you know.
This has really made me giggle because I hate it when people post their Stravas on Instagram. I feel so triggered, but I feel like I'm just triggered by it personally because like I can't run down the street, let alone run like anyway professionally, but running influencers, bag it in.
Running influencers, fuck off, in the bin. Thanks so much for listening to Shallow. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave us a review. It makes a really huge difference in helping others discover the podcast. We always want to hear from you, so feel free to slide into our DMs, send us a bell, or follow us on Instagram at shallowpod, or send us an email at shallow@boxedoff.net. Shallow is a Boxed Off production, written and hosted by Lucy Bell and Phoebe Whittle. We'll see you next time.